This episode is brought to you by ARX. You want to be a successful strength training studio owner. The problem is you aren't able to deliver the safest, most efficient and effective workouts, making it harder for you to attract and retain clients, which makes you feel frustrated. I understand that it can be difficult to differentiate your business without the right tools. ARX's breakthrough adaptive resistance technology uses patented motorized resistance and computer software to give you and your clients the perfect workout every single time. BioFit founder John Zarbok says that ARX is clearly the superior tool to deliver the exercise stimulus. My clients are seeing insane improvements in weeks, not months. I could not fathom running my business without ARX. So here's how you get started. Number one, go to arxfit.com/HOB to get $500 off your ARX machines. Number two, book a call with the ARX sales team. And number three, learn how ARX can help you grow your strength training business. Go to arxfit.com/HOB so you can stop struggling to attract and retain clients and start to grow your strength training business with confidence. Lawrence Snell here, and welcome back to highintensitybusiness.com, the podcast we discuss high-intensity strength training and provide you with tools, tactics, and strategies to help you grow your strength training business. Are you struggling to grow your strength training business? If so, join HIT Business Membership. We provide how-to guides from successful studio owners, a monthly virtual happy hour with experts, Q&As, forum community, private coaching from myself, and lots more resources to help you grow your strength training business with confidence. Join now by going to highintensitybusiness.com and clicking the Join Membership button. This is episode 356, and today's guest is Dr. James Steele, one of my favorite guests, who's appearing for, 39th time. James Steele is an associate professor of sport and exercise science at Southampton Solent University. He's a member of the American College of Sports Medicine and the British Association of Sport and Exercise Sciences, and is a fellow of the Higher Education Academy. James, welcome back to the podcast.
Always a pleasure, Lawrence.
Just moving these notes onto my other screen here so I can look at your lovely face and facial hair.
Trying to grow it back up a little bit higher at the moment.
Are you? Oh, I missed the other. You had a much more, Gandalf style beard before.
Yeah,
if I
came across a photo from at the beginning of lockdown where I just went, sorry, I'm not just going to not trim it at all. And you could not see my neck. It was like proper Amish looking, like big old beard. Yeah. And that was when I started shaving the head again.
I think it went really well with the winter workouts.
Yeah. Kept my face warm.
Absolutely. So, as discussed, for those listening, actually, James and I normally cover some very heavy topics. And I'm sure there's aspects of what we're talking about today which might get into some of the science, but we thought it'd be good to just have more of a lighter conversation about training and James's habits, and which are often things that we might tail end a podcast with. So it'd be fun to just get into that on this episode. And if we do have time, get to some popular questions that are asked as well. So thank you for doing this, James. Always great to see you and chat to you. So let's just talk about your training in general. So what does your training look like right now?
Do you know, that's an interesting question, because it to be honest, it's funny. Whenever we have this conversation, it's like, well, it's pretty much the same as it was last time, right? I'm definitely a creature of habit in that respect, and my training is still and probably always will be, based around a kind of very simple core bodyweight routine. But I will say there have been some kind of broader changes to my kind of approach and mindset to training, I think, recently. I'm actually training a lot less, I find myself, at least over the last sort of few months, partly because I've been picking up other activities and wanting to spend more time doing those, and not wanting training or fatigue or anything like that to kind of interfere with those activities. So I've taken up golf again recently, and it's one of those sports in particular where part of the reason for taking it up is background. I grew up playing golf and was yeah, I was never a great golfer. I was always I had at best my handicap got down to the low teens. So I wasn't like an amazing golfer, but I was an okay golfer. And then didn't play for about 15 years until I picked it up again last year. And so I've enjoyed getting back into a sport and a hobby that I can see myself improving at over the long term, as opposed to, I think in the past we've spoken about, I've run track, played basketball and various things, and they're all sports that you kind of feel yourself, you feel the ravages of age slowly taking over, and you can, the heydays of youth are gone. You're never going to be as good as you were. And so, yeah, I've got this kind of like newfound motivation to throw myself back into golf, wanting to play that more. But it's one of those things I don't want to play when I've got DOMs or I'm feeling fatigued or anything like that. So, yeah, so I've probably found myself on average going back down to maybe training once a week, particularly if I know I'm going to be playing, maybe 1 or 2 rounds of golf that week. And yeah, other than that, it's still very, very similar routine though, full body weight workouts in the garden, the odd workout in the university gym here and there. And yeah, so it's nice. It's quite relaxed. And it's nice to have a new sort of like something else to focus on alongside the training, and to think a little bit about how training fits into that kind of, lifestyle, I guess, at the moment.
And do you see it making any difference that you reduce it down to once a week? Do you still think you're going to get basically the same outcomes as you always have?
Oh yeah, not at all. Like I've noticed, was talking with Fisher about this earlier. Actually, I it wouldn't surprise me in the least if I would very much doubt that I would see any noticeable changes in strength or body composition, even going down to training once every fortnight, even once a month, with my other activities and things. I walk a lot. I walk 10 to 15,000 steps a day. Obviously I'm playing golf, playing basketball, maybe once or twice a week still. So yeah, I really think that at the moment, it's good. It's enough. That minimal routine is very much enough for maintenance. And as we've discussed before, I'm not under any illusion that I'm going to make any drastic changes, or any drastic changes are possible as a result of training anymore. So, I'm happy to focus attentions, and time is limited. So there's an opportunity cost if I spend too much time training. It means I can't spend as much time playing golf.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So does that mean that the single session has slightly more volume than normal or not?
No, it's normally pretty similar, or even in some cases at the moment, because my at least over the last couple of months, I've been fairly busy and my diary's been less predictable than normal. So I think I'd settled into a routine over the last 18 months or so, working primarily from home, and being able to have like just complete control over training whenever, being that I train at home in the garden typically. And now I'm kind of in and out of the university. And so thinking like, okay, well, what days and times am I going to be able to either get in the garden for a workout, or, am I going to have like a half hour I can jump into the gym at the university or something like that. And so it's typically, if I've got time, I'll stick to my normal routine, no more volume than I used to do. Sometimes, though, I'll be finding myself just jumping in the garden and doing a set of pull-ups, push-ups, and a wall sit, or some single leg squats, and literally that being it, and just being kind of get in, get out, get it done, get back because I've got meetings or, too many projects I've said yes to. So yeah.
Me both.
Although having said that, I do find, I think because I'm, in general, my frequency is lower. If I jump into, so for example, Tuesday this week, I trained at the university gym, and was also reminded why I like doing that infrequently, because it was really busy. But, if I'm going to be in that environment and there's access to exercises that I wouldn't normally be able to do at home, I'll normally do a little bit of extra, but it's just because I kind of miss not being able to do those exercises, so I did some deadlifts because I could rack up some heavy weights on the barbell and do some deadlifts, which, I wouldn't normally do. And, I did the 45-degree leg press and the donkey raise calf machine and, probably did more volume than I would typically do for a workout, but more just to take advantage of it's there. I've got, 10 more minutes than I would, normally commit. So plenty of time.
Do you just kind of go in there and judge everyone who's not doing some kind of evidence-based resistance training or high intensity training?
Do you know what? No, it's funny. I had this conversation literally yesterday with a colleague. And I said, you know what, I don't pay anyone any attention anymore in the gym now. I walk in, I do my own thing, and maybe at most I think to myself I briefly give them some consideration and going you know what, you guys are lucky. You guys are going to get a show today.
I love it. Yeah, this is how you do it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the right way, rather than lament the inadequacies of their own training form and programming. Instead, switch it to I'm going to set the example.
Exactly.
So just going back to your own workouts at home, I understand there's those kind of ad hoc workouts. I think we all have that sometimes where we're in a pinch and we've got only so much time. So it's big, free and done. It's chin ups, it's push ups, it's squats or wall sits. But when you do have time and you're not rushing and you can do a full home workout, can you just give us the details on each exercise just so the listeners have a complete view on that?
Yeah, sure. So it's essentially the same as it has always been for probably the better part of the last decade. Is my normal routine will be I'll normally aim to train twice a week, but like I say, at the moment I don't stress out if I don't get twice a week. And I'll normally alternate between a kind of A/B routine that are very similar, just with very slight tweaks. So, one routine will be, neutral kind of push-ups, palms up. Well, actually, to be fair, I got some of those, I've forgotten the brand name now. Yeah. The kind of handles you can loop over and, so I'll do pull-up grip. I think they're called K grips or something.
We'll try and find it.
Yeah. Anyway, so some more free moving handles that I can do some pull-ups from, a little bit like doing it from parallel rings, or gymnastic rings, which I did have. So push-ups, pull-ups, wall sit into bodyweight squats, and then bodyweight row and dips, and maybe a plank, something like that. And then the opposite routine is essentially the same structure, except I'll do wide grip push-ups, a wide grip supinated pull-up, pronated pull-up, single leg squats with a bodyweight hip thrust superset, and then a narrow grip kind of push-up, and narrow grip supinated pull-ups, and then same again. I might throw in some side planks or something like that. So it's very similar in terms of there's a couple of upper body push-pull exercises, a lower body kind of slash trunk extension type exercises, and all in all probably takes me 15 minutes or so to get that full routine done. And then, like you say, in a pinch, I'll run out and be right, push-ups, pull-ups, wall sit done, and be done in 5 minutes, if that. Well, actually, normally more nowadays in terms of how long the wall sit takes.
How long do you wall sit for, generally?
Do you know what? I haven't timed it for so long, but I have a rough idea in my head, and it's partly because I can normally roughly gauge how long it is depending upon where in my playlist I kind of am at. So if I start and I know a certain song is at a certain point, I can normally work it out. And it's probably somewhere around 4 to 5 minutes or something like that.
But how do you build up the tolerance for that? Just doing it?
Yeah, I think it's exposure. I think I've always been a bit of a masochist anyway. I like that discomfort, makes me feel alive. If I am in a pinch though, in terms of sort of time, for example, sometimes I'll be right, I know I've got half an hour, but I need to train, eat, and then jump back back here because I've got a meeting, I will normally do the wall sit with the dumbbells that I've got. So I've got a pair of 27.5 kilo dumbbells. So I'll hold those and just shorten the wall sit massively, just to get things done a little bit quicker.
Yeah, good idea. You just gave me a great cue there for personal training, which is, you're right when you said it makes you feel alive. Like, I feel the same way. It's like when your muscles are burning that much, that's the sort of message it's sending you, right? Or one message, and it gives you that feeling. So I'm just thinking, I was training a guy earlier this morning, and I thought, you know what? The more intense you get, the more closer you get to failure, the more you're going to feel alive. You know, it's like a positive spin on it almost. I think that's really, really interesting way of putting it. Don't think I've heard that before, actually. Cool. So just curious, do you train, doesn't sound like you train neck directly, or do you just leave that out? Or?
Do you know what? It's funny. I did train neck yesterday. And I don't normally train it directly at home, but we do have a 4-way neck in the lab. And so what I tend to do is because I know every now and then I'm going to be in the lab and I'll have a couple of minutes to quickly do, a set of, flexion extension or something like that on there while I'm, say, waiting for someone to come in for data collection, or I'm waiting for a session with some students or something like that. And I will just very quickly jump on it and get it done while I'm there. And, I won't program it or plan it in or anything like that, because I just know, maybe every couple of weeks or so, I'll have the opportunity to just quickly do something like that. Mm-hmm. So, so I did yesterday. Yeah. And I woke up this morning and I was like, like, why is my neck? Oh, yes, DOMs. That's what it is. Like, I did that yesterday.
Wow, neck DOMs. That, I wonder sometimes whether that's the benefit of a neck machine over like a time static contraction or manual resistance neck work. So I'll do neck extension, neck flexion, like lying on a mat. Which you can also obviously do. You could do it like sitting in a chair with a strap, right?
Yeah.
Much like Drew Bay talks about in Project Kratos. Or if I'm going to do lateral, I'll do it manual resistance with my hand, like I just push against it. But I don't know. I've never really experienced neck DOMs, and so I'm curious whether, not that soreness or DOMs is a proxy for better results or anything. You can obviously correct me on that. But I'm wondering if a 4-way neck machine might be slightly more effective, slightly more intense, slightly better at recruiting the neck effectively.
Possibly. Like you say, DOMS is not a good indicator of the effectiveness in terms of, adaptation or anything like that anyway. I wonder whether the DOMS I have was because it's probably, I don't think I have trained neck since maybe the beginning of the year. Like it was, yesterday was a sort of like, oh yeah, actually I hadn't been like, I've been in the lab, but I've been so busy that I've not had the chance to, I've not even thought to like jump on and do a quick set while I was waiting between things. And yesterday it occurred to me, and I think probably the last time I trained neck directly was maybe like January or something like that. So maybe a little bit more of a kind of, it's been a while since those muscles have been directly trained in that fashion. DOMS is very unpredictable, but one thing that does seem to be somewhat predictable is a novelty sort of factor with it. So I deadlifted recently as well for the first time in probably a month and a half, and yeah, like big DOMS after that. And it's not that I was necessarily training muscles that I wasn't training before. I'm training hamstrings, I'm training glutes, I'm training, traps and things. But yeah, there was like soreness that was kind of almost like, oh yeah, you haven't done this for a while.
Yeah, interesting. Do you ever like get concerned that your kind of routine, which is mostly obviously compound movements, is suboptimal because you're not getting maybe some single joint or direct stimulus? Like, for instance, you don't do calf raises very often. Do you feel like a squat or a wall sit is sufficient for, recruiting the calf muscle? And I'm just curious how you think about that overall.
I mean, I do occasionally pepper in some, calf raises, either body weight or with the dumbbells. So I train them. There's certain exercises that will drop off my routine if I'm trying to kind of like be a bit more efficient with it, and I'm not so stressed out or worried about them. I mean, I probably train calves directly in my workouts less at the moment because I am partly because I'm playing golf a lot, and the course we play is really hilly, and so I deliberately carry like way more balls in my bag than I ever need to. Whenever a playing partner like my brother or something like that picks up my bag, they're like, "What the fuck have you got in here? Like, why is this so heavy?" And so, I'm doing a lot of hill walking with a heavy golf bag on. And so I think my calves probably not. I got a good comment on my calves yesterday, and that's having not trained them directly for a while. But that's
genetics.
Probably more genetics, than anything else. Yeah. But no, I think there's enough. I get enough from other activities, and like I say, I think most of what I'm getting now is very much maintenance of what's been achieved, over a career of doing this sort of stuff. Anyway. I don't think I think there are certainly exercises that would benefit more muscles that would benefit more from isolation work, but it's how much more would I benefit from adding those in versus what I'm getting at the moment, which is essentially maintenance. So
yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in this idea of like the global effect of exercises on other muscles that might not seem to be that involved. That being said, I'm currently doing an A/B split, which hits everything, right? More for, well, I guess I am vain and want to see if I can improve, but also for some variety and trying new exercises. But just bringing it back to the neck, I'm just curious, when you're doing a lot of stuff that involves the upper chest, the trapezius, you're going to recruit the neck extensors and the muscles of the neck, right? Do you think that's happening there?
Yeah, I think so to some degree. I mean, so shrugs are something that I'll often do as well, so I'll directly train, the muscles to some degree through that. And like I say, I think I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm somewhat skeptical of the role of neck strengthening in terms of injury prevention in the way it's often portrayed. I think there's less evidence for that than we certainly think there is. And more often than not, when you're going to get the sort of injuries that people think they're trying to prevent are the sort of injuries that are going to happen no matter how strong your damn neck is. Impact injuries in team sports and things like that. It's like, doing a few neck extensions and flexions or time static contractions, that ain't going to be doing much for your risk reduction in that sense. Maybe in terms of mitigating more kind of minor sprains, strains, and chronic injuries and things like that, maybe to some degree. But also at the same time, I think we often overlook the fact that, if you're engaging in those kinds of other activities anyway, you're probably getting to some degree some stimulus from them anyway, so I'm not so sure how essential it is, despite the fact that sort of, in the HIIT community, it's often like many things. There's lots of revered ideas and tenets and things like that people, I think, probably give a little bit more credence to than the evidence should really allow.
All right. Wow, that's interesting. I've not heard that. So have you pored over the literature for neck strengthening quite closely then to come to that, arrive at that?
Not extensively, but there's very few. There's I mean, the sorts of, more often than not, I was having this conversation with Fisher earlier. It's funny. We have this. This is sort of a little bit of an issue with working in the type of field we work in, which is an applied field, where we kind of go back and forth as to what we think motivates or justifies the types of questions we're asking and the types of answers we're looking for. And, so to give you an example, we were talking about proximity to failure and training and adaptation and things like that. And I said, I'm getting to the point where I'm really not interested in the mechanisms anymore. The underlying physiological mechanisms it's really not that interesting to me anymore. It would be more interesting to me if we had knowledge to the extent that we could build a hierarchical kind of like theoretical model of, we know that this degree of kind of tension on the muscle fiber, yields this kind of cascade of phosphorylation of mTOR and blah, 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 and then, the motor unit recruitment at this level leads to that. And we can build it up and up and up to the point where we could say like, right, we've got a model where we could predict the dose response relationship between proximity to failure and adaptation should look like this. That would be fine. But also, most of the time, most people really what they're interested in is how hard should I train to get that adaptation? You don't need to know how it works. You just need to do the studies to answer that question. And so the same thing often applies with discussions around injury mechanisms as well. We talk about things that are empirical questions. They're hard to answer empirical questions. And what we often do is we engage in this kind of inductive inference kind of approach where we come up with plausible sounding theories as to why, for example, neck strengthening it should entail that there would be, if we assume this and we assume that, then it should entail that we see a reduction in injury risk. Well, the simple way to test that is to implement an intervention, and actually do the study that answers that question. I can sit here and be skeptical of it because I know there aren't any studies that have tested that. It might be true. It might well be true. And I'm not saying one way or the other whether it does or doesn't. My position on a lot of these things has reverted to, we've just not tested the idea well enough to really know about it. We've got a plausible sounding theory and that we could, deductively entails, if this is true, we should see this hypothesis here. If neck strength is responsible for moderating injury risk reduction, then that would entail deductively that if we increase it, we should see a reduction in that. Well, we could go do those studies and we can, they're not easy studies to do. That's the point. Yes, in theory, I don't see any harm in doing it necessarily, but I also don't necessarily know that there is the benefit that is often portrayed.
Fascinating.
That's not to say people shouldn't strengthen their neck. Like, do it if you like, if you want to do it. I still do it. I just don't think it's like a magic bullet.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. And I think I'm always conscious of I don't want to have a pencil neck. I mean, I probably got a pretty slim neck anyway. So I'm not that I maybe can move the needle on that much anyway, but I try to do it just to, and it always makes me laugh. I think of what
Kurt Angle neck.
Yeah, it looks good. It looks great there. I always think you look like you've got a good neck, actually, James. When I've been with you in person, I always said that about you. I always thought this guy, like this. Whenever you got critiques about your physique, I never really understood that, because when I saw you in person, I was like, he looks great. And if everyone saw James in person, I don't know, something about person versus video or picture. It's not always does it justice.
Don't photograph well.
Well, yeah, neither do I. But anyways, where was I going with that? So yeah, no, it makes me laugh. I remember Luke saying, if I could add, I think it's 300 grams of muscle to my neck from neck training, having more muscle overall, being a healthful thing, I thought was quite an interesting way of looking at it. Let's just shift gears for a moment here. I'm curious about diet. I don't often talk about diet these days on the podcast because I always think it's that relevant, but there's something I wanted to share on this, which I have to share because I think it's pretty useful to some people. But I'm curious, before I do that, what does your diet look like these days? How do you manage that?
Do you know what? I've really taken a step back from caring too much about diet anymore. For a little while, maybe we talked about this last time, whether it was on recording or not, I can't remember. But I did, over the initial lockdown, reach my kind of heaviest weight. And that was mainly because, I got into the bad habit of working at home and easily just being able to grab stuff out of the cupboards and snack constantly and stuff like that. So for a brief period last year, about 6 months or so, I started tracking calories on MyFitnessPal again. I didn't really do anything in terms of trying to change the pattern of foods that I was eating. I just kind of kept an eye on snacking and stuff like that, and was very easily able to just drop. I put on 3 kilos over lockdown, which isn't a lot of weight. I didn't really look any different, but I was just heavier on the scales. And now I'm back down to the kind of pre-lockdown weight that I was, and I'm not tracking, and it's easily maintained. But
how much do you weigh?
At the moment, I'm about 72 kilos. So I don't know what that is in old money for US listeners.
Yeah, I'll do a quick conversion. You and I are basically the same weight and height. That's why I like saying that you look amazing, because that kind of means I look all right?
Absolutely, you look great, Lawrence. I said it when we got on the call.
You did. He's very kind.
Really well.
Yeah, thank you. So anyway, okay, what is sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah, by the way, that's 158 pounds, just for everyone listening. 72 kilos. But you were saying.
Yeah, so I mean, do you know what? It's funny. I joke, like, I've eaten so much cheese on toast, like, since working at home, because it's just such an easy, like,
Liam Perrins as well, is it?
Sometimes it depends on what cheese we got. So if it's like a nice mature cheddar, then yeah, bet Liam Perrins. But sometimes we'll have a bit of Emmental or some Gouda or something like that, and it doesn't go quite so well. So I mean, I typically still skip breakfast on training days, like, because I like training fasted, and whether there's any benefit from it or not, I very much doubt. But I've got into that habit where I don't like feeling like I've got kind of anything in my stomach, if you know what I mean, when I'm training. Like, I've got very used to, like, just how that feels, and it works for me. I like it. So on training days, I'll still skip breakfast, and then I'll just eat after lunch. And but normally breakfast at the moment is like, I don't know, like a bowl of some cereal, but made with like a protein shake and, chopped up banana and a handful of nuts or something like that. Lunch is easy, cheese on toast. I eat a lot of fruit, apples. I was just snacking on Satsumas before we got on the call. I do have do you know what? This is the one weakness I really do have. I love, like, old school. I don't know if you can see that clearly.
Like mints.
No, bonbons.
Oh,
like toffee bonbons. Like, you still get them in, like, the old school sweet shops. So
yeah, you got an old school sweet jar and everything. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So every now and then. But no, my wife is pescatarian. So to be fair, we don't really eat that much. I don't really eat that much meat, because it's just not that convenient, really, at the moment. It's easier to just cook one meal. We'll eat seafood, fish, but we'll also quite often just have, meals that are, completely vegetarian. And we do both eat a lot of sort of, like, full fat dairy and whatnot as well. But yeah, I'm really not that sort of, like, stressed about diet. I don't really pay it too much mind. I eat to society and just leave it at that. And if I look like I'm putting on some weight, then I eat a little bit less. And if I'm hungry, I eat a bit more.
Yeah.
No.
You said you train fasting. You answered that.
Yeah. So I don't typically fast much more than, like, maybe 16 to 18 hours at most, if I do fast. And it's probably more on the lower end of 14 to 16 hours, overnight, up until I normally train maybe just before or just around midday anyway. So it works out maybe about that long.
Do you not think that the fasting plus the training fasted has a really nice effect on your metabolic health, which in turn probably helps, suppress appetite or allow you to burn fat more effectively, right?
Maybe. Like, I find it hard to, on an individual basis, like, tease out what's causing what. And that's just the nature of, like, determining causality, and it's why we try and do randomized experiments. But I'm skeptical of my own introspection on a lot of things when it comes to this stuff as well. So, I have, for example, like I say, I've got used to the feeling, and I like feeling now fasted when I go into a training session. But I've also got used to the behavioral pattern that I fast, I train hard, and then I typically have lunch afterwards. And so I'm kind of used to expecting food after fasting and training. Now I can easily, like, if I didn't train, like, I can easily still do like a 24-hour fast easily and not really feel that hungry during that period. And every now and then I'll do it just for the interest of doing it. Very rarely now, like, maybe once or twice a year or something. But have
you looked into I'm curious what your views are about the claims about greater longevity from prolonged fasting. What do you think about all that?
I've not really looked into it, and I'll be completely honest with you. Like, I couldn't care less. Like, I really like had again similar conversation with Fisher earlier today. Like, the questions around longevity are just. I mean, we've all got to get off this ride at some point, and like at the moment, like you show me convincing evidence, of which I think there's very little for a lot of questions that we think we do have convincing evidence of. That there is a meaningful increase in health span in terms of, disability adjusted life years, life years spent independent and being able to do whatever I want, not suffering, not having to, seek medical care and be on, rattling like a pill bottle because I'm taking so many medications. That I care about. Adding a year or two onto my life, who knows? By the end of that by the time I get to that point, I might be like, get me the fuck off this ride. I don't want that. Like, I couldn't care less about those sorts of questions anymore. I really couldn't. Maybe my perspective will change when I get to the end. I'm like, no, I want to stay on.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it just doesn't interest me for the sake of what could be a marginally increased lifespan. And of unknown quality at the moment versus having cheese on toast and a nice hot chocolate or whatever. Like right now, like I'll go for that.
This episode is brought to you by ARX. These are the most intense exercise machines I've ever used. I remember how fast a pull-down exercise took me to muscular failure and beyond. On the final negative or eccentric excursion, my tank was practically empty, but the adaptive resistance enabled me to continue to perform work until the predetermined end of the set. This experience was very profound and made me realize how effective ARX is in helping clients reach a high level of intensity in their workouts and ultimately produce the best results. I also love how ARX measures and tracks range of motion, rep cadence, total output and time, and more with real-time audio and visual feedback. These features are powerful sales and retention tools to help you convert and keep more clients. As a listener of the High Intensity Business podcast, ARX is offering you $500 off your machines. Just go to arxfit.com/HOB to book a call with the ARX sales team to learn how ARX can revolutionize and grow your fitness business. Again, go to arxfit.com/HOB, and now back to the episode. Interesting. So you used to be quite strict, if I might say, about Paleolithic diet, that kind of approach. So that's changed. It seems like you're far more liberal about some of your diet choices. And has that had any negative impact on you whatsoever, or has it just had a positive impact in terms of your joy of eating?
Yeah, honestly, nothing. Like this is what. And not to kind of, negate anyone else's, lived experiences and whatnot. But I liken this similarly to, I think we've discussed before. Everyone's got the kind of story of like, I was originally doing high volume this and that, and then I found HIIT and like magically, like I got all these wonderful gains and stuff like that. And I always kind of like was a bit sort of like, really, because honestly, like the same with me, like I've trained a billion different ways, and honestly there's been so little like noticeable difference to my aesthetic, strength, blah blah blah, etc. And anything that has been very very minor, to the extent where I it's kind of easily explained away by things like specificity and stuff like that. But similarly with diet, like there are still, if I something we said before, like once a month, me and a group of friends, we have a geek day, where we play I've been doing some painting at the moment. We
jealous. You actually invited me along to one of these Warhammer meets.
We got our little men's out, we push them around the table, we play some role-playing games and stuff like that. Or some
you play Magic the Gathering?
Yeah, we do.
I love that game.
Haven't played it for a while actually, but yeah, I've got a few decks.
It's now on iOS, by the way, on the iPhone. It's quite addictive.
Yeah, I've got it on. I've got it on Android as well. It's really funny. There was when they originally released Magic and the Arena app. Like I think Danny Trejo was on the advert. Like it was a really funny advert.
Who is that? I don't know who that is.
Elves. He's the Mexican actor with like the really sort of like you know what I mean, like he's in the Machete.
Yes, I know the actor.
He's Machete, and it's really funny. He's there like with his bowl of cereal and he's watching the guy playing. He's like, "Who's your letter or elves?" It's a great advert. It's really funny. But anyway, like what was I saying? Oh yeah, that's it. Like like once a month we'll be like, right, it's a geek day. And I eat like, I don't know, 10,000 calories of crap. Just everything. Donuts, cakes, cookies, blah, blah, blah. Extra large pizza, everything. And the next day I feel a bit like, feel a bit rough. But, it was enjoyable on the day. And then a day later I feel, I have a big poo and I'm fine.
Lovely, James. Thanks. Thanks. That remind me to set this explicit at the end, at the end of the podcast. No, it's interesting to hear all of this stuff. Maybe not that last comment.
Hey, everybody does it.
Everybody does it. It's true. But yeah, it's. What about it just in terms of subtle changes? Like some people claim that like they eat one bad thing and then it makes them feel terrible for like 10 days. Like, I don't know whether that's just some obscure, autoimmune condition they might have or something like that. But it's, if you don't mind me saying, it does sound like you've had a little, I don't know if radical is the right word, but like, would the James of old be eating toffee bonbons and cheese on toast for lunch? Like, or would he have fasted, then had, a steak and eggs and then some other paleo kind of dish in the evening, and if so, but you're reporting that you don't really feel any different having, made this sort of subtle change. I'm not trying to say eat unwell. I don't think you eat badly. I'm just
no.
noticing the change. Yeah,
I'm still very flexible in what I eat, and I just don't really stress about it anymore. And I think that's the thing. I'm not eating junk food all the time. We really well. We mostly just
that's the key
food.
takeaway.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, like most dinners, a lot of fresh veg. But still eat pasta and all the stuff that would get kind of like demonized in the James of old would have questioned and demonized. And I don't doubt people who sort of claim to have these experiences. I and also people sometimes want to know explanations for why that is. Almost comes back to what I said earlier about I'm less interested in the mechanisms for a lot of questions at the moment because I think they're more applied questions. If you know that eating this makes you feel bad, don't eat that. Like maybe you want to understand why that's the case, but I'm less concerned about those sorts of questions at the moment. But yeah, no, I've had it in the past. Like I do remember once we went on holiday to Turkey and I spent the entire week, eating tons of like fresh bread. And I did, I felt rough for it. I had a bit of an acne breakout and stuff like that. And so there are still, certain things that would, if I was eating certain ways, I would feel bad. But at the moment, everything kind of, works for me. I'm not so stressed about it. I've generally got a bit of a new kind of like rule, which I originally, people talk about iron laws. This is my Steele law, and it originally just applies to academia, but I think it's more broad than that. It's like people take themselves too fucking seriously, and they take their ideas too seriously, And I don't know, just got a bit more laid back as I've got older.
I like that. I like the Steele law. No, I am learning a lot actually seeing you evolve over the years. It's interesting. I will say this one last thing on diet and then we'll probably move on. But I have to share this because I think, again, my lived experience. So, not sure if this will work for everyone. But when I had kids, I just started piling on the weight. Not again, you and I we're quite similar genetically. Like we can kind of get away with it, right? It don't look massively different. I'll be like, God, I'm a fat guy, and the missus will be like, Are you kidding me? But I got up to, I don't know, 175, maybe a little bit more than that, in pounds, obviously. And I really struggled to get lower than that, and that's the first time ever I've struggled with trying to lose body fat, and the reason for that is because of a lot of sleep deprivation, right, with the kids, and a lot of stress, and stress would just drive me to make poor eating decisions, and eat it later and things like that. And so I would then go, okay, I've got to get this handled, and inside the membership we've got a little fitness accountability Fred, and I would write in there, right, that's it, lads, I'm going to dial this in now and do it for you guys. Keep me accountable. And then fall off the wagon 2 weeks later. And recently I've landed on an approach which again is not that innovative, and we've been talking about it, intermittent fasting, which is really working for me right now, and seems to be the solution for this time of my life. And basically what I'm doing is, I'm like you, I'm not, I'm quite a little bit more liberal than I used to be about eating choices. I still tend to eat kind of carnivore-esque, lots of red meat, lots of eggs. And I could argue that's because I believe that's healthier, but really it just works for me, right? I enjoy the taste, it's satiating, it's got high in protein, etc. And so I do that. And I don't tend to have any cravings for anything, bad in the morning or early afternoon. So I will then eat, best then. And my life is so crazy right now, and as I'm sure a lot of don't have to be a dad to be busy, obviously, but I found just having kids and running businesses, lots of commitments back to back, and you're constantly rushing around, and it can be 24/7 in nature, and so quite often what will happen is I'll finish work, I'll come downstairs and help my fiance with the kids, and it's like just chaos, right? And just trying to get some food in whilst you're also trying to look after these guys and they're screaming at you to play with them is challenging. And we've got a little system now to make this kind of work better for us. But anyway, the long and short of it is I eat pretty well, and then for dinner I kind of have whatever's going. It usually is like a bolognese or something that's whole food, but then there might be bread, there might be a dessert, a yogurt or something, whatever. I might have a chocolate bar in a day occasionally. For me, actually, about sweet things, it's not necessarily about fat gain and stuff like that. It's more about how it makes me feel. Like, for instance, if I hadn't eaten something badly before we jumped in this podcast, my mind would not be working the same. At least that's what I experience is if I eat badly, it just ruins my productivity. So that actually is more of a factor for me in terms of dialing in my better food choices. But anyway, let's get to the bottom line here is that I found that if I stop eating at 6 or 6:30 at the latest, it just seems my body composition just seems to improve rapidly. Because I used to put Arthur down for bed, and then I'd come downstairs and eat, and I'd eat late and I'd eat more. And there's something about, I know Sachin Panda, the fasting researcher guy, has talked about this a lot. And I believe there's research out there to if you really want to go into this, I'd look at his work, and we'll link it up in the show notes. But there's some research around, how eating later, even if you're eating eating whole food, people that, or I think it might have been in rats, actually, I can't exactly remember, but their outcomes were better than those that were worse than those that were eating anything within in alignment with their circadian rhythm. So eating in the day versus eating late at night, which is interesting. So again, I can't really comment on the quality of that research. You'd have to investigate it for yourself, but I don't know, there's something about whether it's controlling caloric intake or signaling or something. It just seems to work for me, and again, help me shed body fat effectively. And I've just been looking at myself in the mirror lately thinking, I haven't been I can see my abs again, it's like, what is happening here? But yet I'll be eating pretty, as I said, quite liberally, just whatever, I'm there, James, still feeling that stress at 5:30 in the evening. And I'm like, come on, Ash, where's the sugar? I can't find anything here, oh, there's the honey. I'll grab a teaspoon of that, it's so I never used to obviously have that same stress level where I'd need stuff like that. But I just kind of, to an extent, accepted that in my life right now as something that helps me get through things, I suppose, which for good or bad. But anyway, that's a bit of a long-winded story.
Yeah, no, it's interesting though, and I do think, like, you know, it may be a cliche or whatever, but it's like many of these things, the effects of a lot of the things that we manipulate and control, and the kind of, you know, minutia we try and tweak around. You know, people probably aware, and I'm skeptical as to how big an impact they have. But if you can find something that seems to be working and fits kind of into your daily routine well, you know, it just works for you in that sense, then you know, that's great. I'm kind of the opposite. Like, I'd prefer to be eating. Like, I like, there's something nice about we often end up having dinner a bit later anyway. You know, we might eat dinner maybe around 7, 7:30, something like that. And there's something like, you know, we'll maybe sit down and watch something on TV or whatever. And I quite like having like something there. Like, you know, I'll tell you one thing that I do is my weakness. Ice cream's always been my weakness. Like, I can just, like, I can polish off, you know, 2 tubs of Ben & Jerry's, no problem. I wouldn't even feel guilty. But because of that, what I do is I often have the freezer like stocked up with the like 350 cal like tubs of like ice cream. I like the Graham's Dairy stuff, and you know, so after dinner it'll be like, right, I'm going to sit and eat an entire tub of ice cream. And it's nice. I like sitting there. It's nice. You feel nice chill out time. Sit there, enjoy the ice cream. Oh, it's great. Yeah.
Every night or just every now and again?
Sometimes. Like, sometimes I'll have, like, you know, like every evening of the week could be. And then other times I'll be like, I just don't feel like it tonight. You know, I'm gonna have a cup of tea and you know, that'll do. But yeah, it's you just find kind of what works for you. Like, for me, it works quite well. Like, I could quite easily get up, just drink black coffee in the morning, and then, you know, eat at lunch, and, you know, have some lunch, have some fruit as a snack or whatever, have some dinner, have some ice cream after dinner.
So I know you don't care about mechanisms, right? No, I'm not saying you don't care, but you're saying you're caring less about that, and I get that. But it just seems to me that, like, well, I guess we're not talking about because talking mechanistically, we're talking about the biochemistry of all of this, right? But the fact that you fast in the morning, and the fact that you strength train, and obviously the fasting helps you control that caloric intake, the strength training helps you become more metabolically flexible and insulin sensitive, that is perhaps allowing you to get away with this. Is that a fair comment? Maybe it's just the fact that
such a scientist. It's like 350 calories of ice cream. Like, it's not a huge amount. And it's and it's like 25 grams of protein or whatever. Like, you know, it's I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Again, like the old James would sit here and maybe bullshit some like plausible sounding mechanism, and now I'm like, I don't know.
No, not at all. I think you've always been quite honest about your lack of opinion on a lot of these matters, to be honest, from the beginning. I would say I've always admired that about you. You know that. I want to talk to you about quantified self stuff. Now, I know, again, you're probably going to be coming at this with a little bit of what some might see as a pessimistic outlook, but I think you come at this with a very scientific outlook, and I think that's why it's valuable. But I've been hammered by this lately from all directions in terms of people wanting to, I guess, come on the podcast to talk about, you know, different devices that track, you know, different data, like the Whoop bracelet or whatever it is, Aura Ring, all these kinds of things. And obviously now that I run a personal training studio, people talk about this all the time. You know, I have people on the machines like hitting their watches to track whatever beforehand. And I get in some interesting conversations, but I always think back to that conversation we had a while ago. It's probably a couple of years ago now, where we were talking about, I think it was you we had this conversation with, where we were saying about, you know, if you're tracking sleep, for example, if you wake up and you look at your sleep quality and it's crap, does that then become like a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like, you end up having a terrible day and being less productive. Whereas if you've never seen that data, you might have been just fine, for example, right? So anyway, let's just kick this one off. Give me your latest view on this. Do you still kind of blanket statement think none of this is useful? Why are we doing it? It's all noise. Or do you think there's utility to some of it? And if so, where?
So the way I think about this now is very similar to how I've always felt about it, but it's maybe there's a little bit more nuance to it now. So I think of it from a kind of decision theoretical perspective, and when you look at like decision theory is really just the area of study about how do we make choices given information, and particularly like statistical decision theory. And again, like, it's really funny. Like maybe because we were going to have this conversation, I had this conversation. Me and Fisher grabbed a coffee before this, and
appreciate
I was talking about it. But I kind of said we were talking about like my training, and I generally kind of feel like given what we know about the long term way in which strength adapts to continued engagement and resistance training, I'm sat right in the plateau at the moment. That's pretty much where I am. That's where a lot of people are in this kind of like niche. And so from that perspective, like, taking that as an example, the way I look at it is, on the one hand, someone could say like, you need to be tracking everything. You need to know if you're, increasing, decreasing, blah, 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 blah. And I look at it now and think like, what's the utility of that information? Like, how does that information help me make decisions? Like, how does it, like, will that information in any way change the decisions I make about the way in which I engage in this behavior? Like, if I were to track my workouts, for example, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen any meaningful improvements, when I was tracking my workouts religiously, so given everything we know about, or I can claim to say that I think I know about the way in which people adapt to long-term engagement and resistance training, I'm not convinced I'm getting any meaningful increases now anyway. And I'm certainly not really convinced that changing what I'm doing is going to produce any changes. Let's say I find out that, oh no, my strength is going down. Like, I'm getting worse. Like, well, what am I going to do? Well, again, as far as I know, nothing I do is going to change that. That's aging. That's just what's going to happen. So I look at it from a utility perspective and think like, is the information I'm capturing going to actually be useful for me in making decisions about what I do? And for the vast majority of stuff that people kind of lump into the quantified self movement, because it's all very much kind of like health oriented, that movement is, I kind of think it's not going to make any changes to it's not going to help me make changes and decisions about what I'm doing. Now, I'll give you an example where I do track things. Golf. So I'm tracking like what clubs I'm using for different shots. I'm tracking what distances I'm hitting.
Spreadsheets.
Well, I mean, I've got an app. I've got a watch and an app that does it all for me. Like I did think about doing that, and then I was like, actually, this would be way less work to just buy something that already does this for me. But yeah, like, I want to know like what aspects of my game are improving, what aspects of, because it's something where like I can still make decisions about what I should be focusing time on practicing and things like that. So there I see utility to the data. Other areas I don't see utility to capturing that data. Capturing data, there's always a cost associated with it, whether it's buying the stuff to do it, the time to do it, all of this kind of stuff. And this is all stuff that like should, in theory, go into like study planning and stuff for research as well. Again, it's hard to do, but the best approach to kind of research would really be to say, like, what's the utility of additional information, like in this respect? Is it worth the costs of doing the study in the first place? And that's not how it works, because everyone has, they need to do the study to get the paper, to get the promotion, to get the job, and that's how science progresses, in a sociological sense. But in an ideal world, we would properly be statistical decision theorists and think about the in the kind of homo economicus kind of way, think about the utility of the decisions, the information and the costs associated with getting it and stuff like that. So I guess that was a bit waffly, but in a roundabout way, that's kind of my general view on data in general, and it applies to data I capture on myself as well. I capture it if it's worth me capturing it. Like another thing I keep track of. I keep track of my average miles per gallon on my car, because I like to try and keep it as low as possible. I like to be green. I also like to spend less money on petrol. So I quantify that now. And it's useful. Like if I see it's going up, I try and drive a bit more economically. So like if there's utility to it and the cost of getting it is low, then I do it. If not, then I don't stress about it.
Yeah. Interesting. So yeah, like you say, if there's utility in tracking it, then and it makes sense, then you will. It's like bringing it back to the numbers when we track reps and performance in the studio in personal training. Like to your point, like it might not make any difference. If they get to muscle failure, who cares, right? For the most part, but people love to see numbers show, as a measure of their performance, because it's very it seems very black and white. And what we found is that it works really well to show people, because we can show them how much their strength has improved. Like that is obviously objective measure, so long as we're controlling all the variables and stuff like that. But people just love to see that improve over time, even if it doesn't. You don't really need to see that in order to know what to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we understand it's powerful for a retention to the protocol, and that's really important for individuals to get the best results, and obviously for the business. But yeah, there's some of these other data points that you're, questioning the utility of. And maybe we could talk about a couple specifically. So I had someone talk to me about HRV, heart rate variability. How do you feel about this one? Because, for example, if you're tracking heart rate variability, some people might say that, well, if it's changed by this much, then that's a sign that you're not recovered from your workout, and therefore you should increase recovery. Isn't that an indicator for helping us make sure that we train when we're recovered? Or how do you feel about that, for instance?
Again, like maybe. So one thing I will say is, if you want to have a more in-depth discussion about heart rate variability, you should get mine and Fisher's colleague, Emma Mosley, on the podcast at some point. She did a session for the rec when they did it on.
Yes, I was on that. Yeah, I was on that. Yeah.
So she's a psychophysiologist, and one of her areas is in heart rate variability. She uses that as a tool a lot, and she's also written a lot on kind of like dispelling a lot of the myths around interpretation of heart rate variability and what that physiological signal can really tell us about kind of psychological phenomena and vice versa. I think the issue. I often think like, so let me give an example, right? As I said, like I'm somewhat managing my training frequency and volume a little bit more to manage potential fatigue, because I want to play golf more. I don't want to go play golf when I'm fatigued, because if I have a crap round, then I'll be like, I should have waited a day and like I would have played better. Like, but the thing is, I don't really need my heart rate variability measurement to tell me like, oh, you should wait a day before you play golf. It's like, no, I know how I feel.
Right.
Yeah. So it's almost, again, it almost comes back to what are we actually making the decision based on? Is it based on the, like, for example, if your heart rate variability scale said, oh, you should take a couple of extra days off training, but you're like, what? I feel great. Like, I feel like I could train that now. What do you do? You've got conflicting information there. You still got to make a decision. What do you weight more in terms of the decision? And then I also think to myself, well, for the example I gave is fine, because I'm thinking about the acute performance of like how I play golf that day. But most people, when they're thinking about managing training stimulus, they're thinking about the effects on longer term adaptation. Well, is really using your heart rate monitor to measure heart rate variability and think about taking an extra day off going to really affect your gains long term? Or, as opposed to if you trained like a little bit too early or maybe a little bit later than your heart rate monitor says. So, like, again, like I'm not saying people shouldn't do it. I personally don't see necessarily the value in it for those outcomes. Now, one thing I would say though is, like you said before, like some people love this stuff, some people love it, and if you love it, do it. Like geek out on this stuff. Like if that's the reason you love it, then do it. But you're not going to fool me that there's like really utility in doing it for these other things. Like I think about it in the sense of as well. So as people will know, one area of research I'm super interested in is like effort in general, and I've been it's an area of research where I can spin a yarn about why it's useful for me to conduct kind of conceptual analysis and sort of deep philosophical thought about what is effort, what is perception of effort, and think about how do we define these concepts and how do we understand them and how do we understand their relationships, and I can come up with all these wonderful reasons why well, if we understand this a bit, then that will help with developing theories around this and that, and all of this wonderful stuff. And it's all a bit bollocks, really, because I can't tell you why. For some reason, I just find it interesting. Like it's just, I don't know what it is. Something about it, like just it's an interesting little puzzle to solve. What's the utility in doing it? Well, I have a good time thinking about it, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine as a motivation.
Isn't there utility in terms of how that then turns it, stimulates more research around like how we get people to, if we, what am I trying to say, it basically allows us to better understand how much effort we need to apply when we exercise, and then how then we transfer that into the real world. Like there is utility there,
absolutely.
Right? It's not just a selfish pursuit here, James.
No, but when I think about the utility, I'm thinking about the utility for me in pursuing it, because someone else could go do it for those reasons. But why do I do it? Like what? Like if is my motivation all of those things you just said? It's good for science, good for developing this. There might be some potential. A bit like when Watson and Crick were tinkering around with understanding, the structure of DNA. Like they could not have foreseen all of the potential benefits out of it. Maybe they had an idea in their head of like, if we figure out this, maybe there'll be some cool stuff we can do in the future for this, that, and the other. But maybe not. Maybe they just found it interesting. And that was the utility for them. That was the value that they got out of it. And this is maybe a bit broad again because it's thinking about why do we do science?
This is interesting. Yeah,
I have to quickly find it. There's a great. I'll send it over to you, but.
Joe, just while you're looking, I mean, it's weird. Like I love gadgets, right? But I never ever got into the quantified self movement. I think, I don't know, maybe you put me off. But I did like the idea of an aura ring, because I like the fact that you could wear it and then you don't have to really think about it. You don't have to be like actually putting, like you were talking about the effort and time for this stuff. Like it's automated. I think the only thing that put me off was the cost of buying one. And then also thinking that actually, am I just going to, I already find myself, I did one of these personality tests recently on these Jordan Peterson things. And I score, I don't know, Dave Smith, your colleague, Dave Smith, PhD, told me offline that I don't think I should take this stuff. Or was it offline? Maybe even said on the podcast, questioned whether I should take these things that seriously. But anyway, put that aside for a moment. I scored very, very high on like conscientiousness and neuroticism and orderliness, like top 1 or 2 percentile kind of thing. And I gotta say, like, that does seem, this is not hindsight bias, that I am that way. Like I get so stressed out about open loops, if you know what I mean, like undone to-do lists. Like, so I have to be very mindful of like, how many things am I actually tracking? And that's another really, that's a big obstacle for me for like pursuing or looking into the quantified self stuff. Cause I'm like, I'll just get real depressed if I start to try and track all this stuff, And I'm already trying to eliminate, I'm trying to delete, stuff. So anyway, that's just a thought I wanted to share. But did you find what you were looking for there?
Yeah, no, it was just, I was thinking about it in general. So there's a great interview with a guy called Michael Atiyah, who was a British Lebanese mathematician. And there's a question, I screenshotted this because I loved it. And I shared it with my student because I teach research methods and philosophy of science and stuff to students now. So I'll read it out to you. The interviewer said, yeah, so how do you select a problem to study? And Atiya's response was, I think that presupposes an answer. I don't think that's the way I work at all. Some people may sit back and say, I want to solve this problem. And they sit down and say, how do I solve this problem? I don't do that. I just move around in mathematical waters, thinking about things, being curious, interested, talking to people, stirring up ideas. Things emerge and I follow them up. Or I see something which connects up something else I know about and I try to put them together and things develop. I've never practically started off with any idea of what I'm going to be doing or where it's going to go. I'm just interested in mathematics. I talk, I learn, I discuss, and these interesting questions simply emerge. I've never started off with a particular goal except the goal of understanding mathematics. And I think more and more, like both in terms of kind of, just personal like life and what I do, because, work and scientific pursuit is part of just what I do now as well. I think about it in the same way, like I did now, like I'm not that interested in like the mechanisms and stuff like that anymore. But really, I also am, because I've got more interested in, as you've probably realized, in more how do we, like methodological questions around how do we even answer some of these questions. And oftentimes there will be cool opportunities to try and solve puzzles where I'm not really that interested in the substantive question, so to speak, but I'm interested in how do we figure out a solution to this puzzle, because that could be quite cool. It could, we could take that and it can apply to this, that, and the other. And so I'll give you one quick example. I'm going to be hopefully working with going back into some sporting applications, because there's a company that has developed these kind of training tools and testing tools for soccer and netball and various different sports. And I've been working more on trying to understand, measurement theory, and in psychometrics, there is something called item response theory. I won't go into detail about it, but anyway, it's a kind of approach to measuring latent phenomena that is applied quite broadly in psychology, psychometrics, in educational, testing and things like that. And I've been using this for certain things, and all of a sudden it kind of clicked that this could be used in this application. It's like, oh, that's interesting. It's like, I don't really care about soccer, but this could be quite cool to try this out. And it turns out, someone wrote a paper suggesting this in 1989, and no one's done anything about it since then. So I was like, oh, cool. This is like a cool, fun little puzzle, like a fun little opportunity to try something new, something exciting. And it's interesting. Don't know why. And do you know what? There could be incredible utility from it, because I think, as we've discussed in the past, we wrote that paper about sports performance, how hard it is to measure and things like that. Well, actually, this, some of the, I won't go into detail on them because it's quite complicated mathematical modeling. But, if it works out, we could end up with ways of testing and exploring whether sports ability improves as a result of different interventions. That kind of gets around the issues that we've discussed in previous podcasts. And, why that's interesting, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. And that keeps me up at night. Why do I find this interesting? I think one of the lessons here is follow your curiosity and your natural interest, right? Even if it derails whatever it is you're doing. I mean, within reason, obviously. I mean, yeah, I just had this urge yesterday to read Cal Newport's book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, which, by the way, is a book all about build a business or pursue a career or whatever based on your skill and competency as opposed to your passion, which is obviously a bit, sort of spins that whole view of, go and pursue your bliss or pursue your passion, you'll be happy. He sort of challenges that, and it's really interesting. And a bunch of people mentioned it to me recently, and I meant to read it a while back, and I haven't. And I just, it stuff like that just spontaneously happens, right? You just have an idea. I want to read that, or I want to go do that, and it's like, maybe that is a way of finding, flow or joy or happiness or whatever you want to call it. And actually be productive too, because it's like it's an effortless
activity. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, and this is the thing. It's all of this stuff is hard to bottle and tap. It's you say about flow, like it's. I was genuinely astounded because as someone who experiences that a lot, it shocked me to find out that some people have never had those experiences, or they've never. You describe these experiences to them and they can't relate to them in whatsoever, and for that I think, well, I'm really, really fortunate, and it doesn't help because it's like, well, I don't know what lessons people can learn, because again, some people look at the way I kind of think about these things and think, I just couldn't do that. I need to feel like I'm having an impact and doing something meaningful and stuff like that. And that's cool if that's what motivates and drives you, do it. Like, I'm just conscious of time, but maybe a good way to finish this is I had a session a few weeks back. I'm teaching research methods to undergraduate students at the moment, and I've taken a very different approach to it now. It's we spend a lot of time in kind of more deep philosophical thought around things and discussion, and we had a very long, engaging kind of discussion about how do you pick a research question to work on. And it was interesting to see the diversity of perspectives in the room, and I was quite lucky that I could kind of say, most of what I try and do is exactly what we've just discussed there. But at the same time, I also do work on things that are meaningful or impactful and stuff like that. And while that might not be the real driver for me doing it, that's not, you don't have to limit yourself to, I'm just going to go do this passionate thing that I care about, that it's interesting, that has no impact whatsoever on the world. There's probably a balance you can find, something that keeps you ticking, keeps you buzzing, keeps you interested, keeps you passionate, but has some benefit to others. And that's the cherry on top if that's the, that's what we end up getting.
It's funny because I do have like a purpose that drives me to do high intensity business and the studio, and that's around basically impacting people's health and transforming lives, and whether that's directly through the personal training studio or kind of indirectly through high intensity business, helping others attract more customers and change more lives. But am I really doing it for that reason, or am I doing it for another reason? Right? Am I doing it for just my interest in this area and my love of strength training and what have you? We'll leave it there because I know you've got a hard stop, James, but really appreciate you coming back on. Ways for people to, what's the best way for people to contact you these days if you want people to contact you?
Probably Twitter. So people can follow me on Twitter and see me post ramblings and occasional weird things. Or via email, So actually, to be fair, like people can, I've recently set up my own kind of research consulting business.
Oh wow!
And so so to save people from like emailing my university email, if people want to contact me, they can contact me via that, which is james@steele-research.com.
Great. We'll link that all up. And for everyone listening, to find this blog post and download a free PDF on how to attract great personal trainers to your strength training business, please go to highintensitybusiness.com, search for episode 356. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. This episode is brought to you by ARX. You want to be a successful strength training studio owner. The problem is you aren't able to deliver the safest, most efficient and effective workouts, making it harder for you to attract and retain clients, which makes you feel frustrated. I understand that it can be difficult to differentiate your business without the right tools. ARX's breakthrough adaptive resistance technology uses patented motorized resistance and computer software to give you and your clients the perfect workout every single time. BioFit founder John Zarbok says that ARX is clearly the superior tool to deliver the exercise stimulus. My clients are seeing insane improvements in weeks, not months. I could not fathom running my business without ARX. So here's how you get started. Number 1, go to arxfit.com/HOB to get $500 off your ARX machines. Number 2, book a call with the ARX sales team. And number 3, learn how ARX can help you grow your strength training business. Go to arxfit.com/HIB so you can stop struggling to attract and retain clients and start to grow your strength training business with confidence.